I spent 17 years learning how to step into chaos, control it, and walk away without leaving a trace. Violence was never something I talked about, it was something I managed. But none of that training prepared me for the night my 15-year-old son ended up in the ICU because 6 boys decided he needed to be taught a lesson. I came back to a small town in Ohio at 42, carrying injuries that never fully healed and memories I never explained. My son Drew was the one thing in my life that felt clean and right. His mother passed suddenly when he was 9, and from that moment on it was just the two of us. I was not the kind of father who gave long speeches or warm hugs, but I showed up every day in the only way I knew how. Drew understood that, and he became the kind of kid who noticed things and stood up for what mattered. Millbrook was the kind of town where certain families operated above consequences. Their sons ruled the high school, especially the wrestling team. The coach had built a winning program, but what he really built was protection for the boys who wore his colors. Those boys were raised by men who controlled contracts, city decisions, and school policies. They believed rules were optional if your last name carried enough weight. Drew did not belong to that world, and they made sure he felt it. A few weeks before everything fell apart, Drew saw something he could not ignore. He noticed changes in the wrestlers, sudden size increases, aggressive behavior, things that did not add up. So he wrote a detailed report and gave it to the athletic director, asking for someone to look into it. That letter never started an investigation. Instead, it landed in the hands of the coach, and from there, it reached the boys it exposed. The call came while I was fixing a fence in my backyard. A teacher told me she saw 6 boys attack my son after practice. Her voice shook as she explained that they did not stop when he hit the ground. I remember placing my tools down carefully, like the world had slowed to a crawl, and asking one question. How bad is it? The silence before her answer told me everything I needed to know. At the hospital, Drew looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Machines breathed with him, and bruises spread beneath his skin where no one would immediately see them. He opened his eyes when I sat beside him, and I told him to rest. I stayed there for hours, completely still, because I knew that whatever came next required patience. The next morning, I went to the school. The principal gave me a polished speech about procedures and investigations, trying to soften what had happened into something manageable. Then she suggested that maybe my son had provoked it, that 6 boys do not act without reason. I listened without interrupting, because sometimes people tell you exactly who they are if you let them keep talking. When she asked if I expected her to call the Marines, I smiled, because in that moment I understood the rules she believed in. Before I left, Drew's teacher pulled me aside. She told me she had recorded everything from her classroom window. It was planned, she said, every second of it. I told her to keep the video safe and wait. Timing matters more than truth when you are dealing with people who think they are untouchable. What they did not know was that I had spent most of my life studying people, patterns, and weaknesses. I did not react immediately. I observed. I learned their routines, their habits, the places they felt safe. I spoke to the athletic director and recorded his quiet confession without ignoring the warning signs. I walked the parking lot and noticed the camera that had been turned away days before the attack. That told me everything was deliberate. By the 3rd day, things began to change for those boys. One ended up in the hospital with injuries he could not fully explain. Another was found shaking, unable to account for hours of his night. The others followed, each experiencing something that made them understand fear in a way they never had before. None of them spoke to the police. That silence told me they understood more than they were willing to admit. Their coach disappeared for 2 days and returned a different man. He resigned without explanation. A detective I knew came by my house, looked me in the eyes, and asked if there was anything I wanted to share. I told him my son was coming off life support soon. That was all he needed to hear. A few nights later, the fathers came to my house together. 6 powerful men, used to controlling outcomes, standing on my porch as if their presence alone would shift the balance. They accused me without proof, confident in their position. I let them speak, then I showed them something far more powerful than anger. First, the video of their sons planning and carrying out the attack. Then the recording of the man who ignored the warning. Finally, a document I had prepared, detailing every questionable decision, every hidden conflict of interest, every vulnerability each of them carried. It was all ready to be sent to authorities who would not care about their influence. The silence that followed was different. It was the kind of silence that comes when control slips away completely. I gave them a choice. Their sons could face the consequences quietly through legal channels, or everything would be exposed publicly. They understood the weight of that decision. Within hours, every document I needed was signed. After that, the truth started moving on its own. The video was submitted, statements were filed, and the system that had protected those boys began to collapse under its own weight. People stepped down, investigations opened, and the program that once stood untouchable was suspended. Drew came home a week later. He moved slowly, still healing, but he walked through the door under his own strength. That mattered more than anything else. That evening, we sat on the porch like we always did, watching the neighborhood settle into its usual rhythm. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he asked what happened to the boys. I told him they were facing consequences, that their future would not look the same. He listened, but I could tell he was asking something deeper. When he finally looked at me and asked if I was okay, I gave him an honest answer. I told him I was, because for the first time since that phone call, everything felt balanced again. Not perfect, not clean, but settled. And as the light faded and the world grew quiet, I realized that sometimes justice is not about what you say or what you show. Sometimes it is about making sure the right people understand exactly where the line was, and what it cost to cross it.